science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Synchronistic salutations, you cognonauts out there. I'm Ayla, and I'll be your host for tonight's ExoFathom. As always, I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Nick and Mike. How are y'all doing today?
Hey, happy Monday. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Happy Monday. Happy long weekend.
Yeah. And to you.
Thank you.
I'm surviving.
You're surviving, Mike.
I'm surviving. Staying alive.
How's the cat doing? Does it have at least 2 paws on the stick, or are you down to 1 claw? Where are we at?
And there's like 3 claws. 3 claws are on the stick.
Just enough to hang in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just enough.
Well, that's awesome. And might I add, if you get bored of the cat analogy, we can go chameleon. I saw a chick, she had a chameleon as a pet, and they do hanging as well. So
what about a sloth? Sloths are adorable.
You know, they really are, though. I don't know why they always look like they have this pleasant grin on their face. It's like never a happy smile. It's just a pleasant grin.
Like they got away with stealing some cookies or something.
Yes, they stole some cookies. Absolutely. Well, yeah, and happy Memorial Day to all our listeners. Hope you had some tasty eats and some time off from whatever it is you do. And so tonight we actually got together a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and just we're talking about how we've been doing ExoFathom for about a year now. And so, what fresh topics, we could talk about the imminent disclosure till the cows come home, but we wanted to do something a little non-alien, just because ExoFathom is about all kinds of things. And so it was suggested to talk about synchronicity. And so that's what's going to be on the menu for tonight. And fun fact, I did not really know that synchronicity was different from serendipity. So I almost did a show on serendipity until I realized that it was called synchronicity. So I'm still pretty new. This will be kind of fun refresher. But Nick and Mike, if you had to describe synchronicity in like one word, how would you even define it?
Well, I would define it as serendipity.
I said one word, huh? One sentence.
Damn it.
I heard that. No, because I was talking for too long, and then the whole time I'm talking, I'm like, I need to wrap this up, move it along, and choo-choo. Anyway.
Well, the Jungian concept of the meaningful coincidence, I guess, is probably the best way I can describe it too. I don't know if I know any other way of describing it, to be honest, but yeah, something along the lines of that, something along the lines of the stars aligning, or that moment of feeling like everything falls into place, or something is brought to your attention. I don't know. It's kind of intangible.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, definitely intangible. Like the first thing that pops into my mind, but this just may go back to serendipity, right? It's like of all the gin joints in the world, she had to walk into mine. That's like that causal thing, the causal link that goes beyond coincidence, I guess. Like something that falls into line, but just seems bizarre. Like I guess more mundane examples are like if you're thinking of somebody, like a friend or something, and all of a sudden they call you out of the blue for some reason.
Yeah, like that is a little creepy, and remind me to go back to that, because that makes me think about something a little later on, which we might talk about sooner. But I think you're right. Like it's like a cousin of deja vu, and the stepbrother of serendipity. and the child of no. I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of like along the lines of like your ideas or your thoughts are in line with something imminent.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's exact or enough, but that's kind of the way I kind of conceptualize it, especially within this sort of framework of thinking of somebody and they have they call you. It would seem to me that there's some sort of connection to thought and then immediate action that correlates with that thought.
And what's interesting is it would have been two thoughts, right? There's two independent consciousnesses connecting somehow. And so, yeah, I mean, it is a really weird topic. I always just knew I knew what it meant, but obviously I didn't know it was separate from this other word. And then once I did know that, I was like, what is it? So, Webster's defines, no, I didn't go to Webster. I just Googled it. I think this is just like a generic definition. But I did look it up because I'm a total dork. And so it's a noun. And it says it's a simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal link. And I mean, that's, that's very bland. But I mean, it's exactly what it is. Simultaneous occurrence of events, two things happening at the same time. They appear really related, but there's no discernible causal connection.
Yeah. Honestly, it makes me think of precognition a little bit. Because it's hard for me to divorce it from the concept of like you thinking of something and then having that. So I don't know if there's any like instances in which that can occur without somebody pre-thinking the event. You know what I mean? Like, does synchronicity exist without somebody pre-thinking the thing that happens?
It might be subconscious too. I mean, looks like when two holograms coalesce into one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and they always say, like, if your ears are burning, that means someone's talking about you or something like that. Which, as we know on this show, if you start digging deeper into things, like that has me wondering, where did that saying come from? Is it related to this? And so anyway, I remember reading this definition, and at first, like, I'll be honest, it did absolutely nothing for me. I was like, this still doesn't make sense to me. So here are some of the examples that they listed out, similar to Mike's think of a friend example. So synchronicity could be if you keep seeing the same number and then you meet somebody whose phone number repeats the same number or parts of it. You could be thinking about something, so I guess it's your friend, but it could really be anything, and then mysteriously it just happens. It could also be being in the right place at the right time, or dreaming about people, animals, and places, and then seeing them repeatedly in real life. So those are just a few, and I'm curious, do either of you have any personal examples with synchronicity that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I definitely have like certain things that happen to me. Numbers are usually one of them. 1111, 444, those types of numbers constantly. And whenever I look at a clock, I did recently have a dream about Minsk, Belarus. And that just came out to have some pretty large, I guess, political happenings going on in, just a couple weeks ago. Weirdly enough, I did not know that Minsk was in Belarus. So that's kind of a weird thing that I got from my dream. I don't think I've ever seen those two things correlated with each other before. The only reference I have to Minsk is from Friends when Hank Azaria goes to Minsk to study.
Right. Or he's doing research.
And I think it was part of the Soviet Union back then. So, I don't know. I mean, like, there's definitely some things I don't necessarily. It's also one of those things where it's like, unless it's super hard hitting, it's something that you can kind of dismiss really easily as well. Just kind of just being a coincidence.
Oh, yeah. Like I dreamed of a stapler and then I saw a stapler. Like that happens all the time. No, I don't dream about
Oh, you
staplers.
dream about staplers?
No, I just qualified that.
I'm a stapler.
Yeah.
This like just reminds me a bit of Murphy's Law, right? Like whatever can go wrong will go wrong. I'm kind of
Mm.
thinking about that in the negative sense.
Right, right, right.
Synchronicity is, I mean, the example I always go to is I met this girl at this party, amazing girl, and I didn't get her phone number by the end of the night, right? And I couldn't find out like where she lived or where yeah, like I just couldn't get back in contact with her to like mess with me a bit
Wait a
'cause I
minute.
really wanted to take this girl out.
Hold on, hold on, hold on. Did you dress up as a hanging Chad for every Halloween since you met her?
Oh yeah, every Halloween, and it's all in New York. I'm actually
Yeah,
not in LA. I'm in New York.
yeah. Your name's really Ted.
Yeah,
This is
and
a How I Met Your Mother's reference for anybody
no,
out there.
no. Well, that's that reference was, yeah, but this story is not. And
Mm.
so, like a couple nights later, I have like my routine. I went to the bar, and this girl's still on my mind. After the bar, I go to this fast food place, and it's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that. And I walk in, and she's right there.
Hmm.
So to me, that was at least very serendipitous. And we ended up dating for a while.
But was
Um,
it synchronicity?
I think so. There's
Done
some
did
reason why she
it.
went over there. She went out. She was out with friends drinking that night. So these two completely independent people or groups drinking and then going to the same fast food point at some god-forsaken hour in the morning. So it seems a little synchronicitous to me. Other things that come out is like I always check the clock at um, whatever hour it is with 47 minutes. Just happens. Don't know
Oh,
why.
like you just look at it and you're like, damn, it's 47 past again.
Yeah, like all the time.
Hmm.
And then if I'm outdoor dashing and there's certain probabilities that you'll get certain prices for certain deliveries. And if I need like a high price, for some reason, I will get one of those low probability, high payout deliveries. And it'd be
Hmm.
a little bizarre. It's happened a little bit too much for me to ignore, right? So
I
there's
wonder if they have like a direct connection to your bank account and like monthly needs, and they're like, oh, this guy, send this one this way. Like that would be kind of a cool algorithm for that kind of gig.
a little,
Creepy
invasion
too.
of privacy. That's all.
Yeah, that too.
Now, they might have my microphone on or something, and I'd be like, I need this much to reach my goal, and they're like, oh, here it is.
That's true. I mean, hey, if I had a job to like listen to drivers and just like fulfill their wishes, that'd be kind of a cool job. You'd be like the fairy godmother of dispatch or something like that.
Or just
Um,
dispatch.
or just dispatch, yes, just that. But no, I would demand that I be called fairy godmother and be like, what is your wish? No, but speaking of like wishes and good things, so the definition of serendipity, it's also a noun, and it's the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. So it's very similar. They call it chance as opposed to what two simultaneous events
Without
significantly related,
causal
but no,
links.
yeah, no causal connection. So it seems to me that serendipity is just good synchronicity, like synchronicity with good outcomes. So then that makes me think about like synchronicity with neutral outcomes or bad outcomes. I mean, is that all synchronicity is?
Well, I would think serendipity is more like luck, in the conventional sense, and synchronicity is something akin to simultaneity. But I don't know.
Oh, I see what you're
I would say that luck is probably more close to serendipity, and then synchronicity is just more about like a simultaneity of two entities, merging onto one sort of access.
You know what? And the Google gods would agree with you. If you do serendipity thesaurus, you get fluke, luck, accident, chance, good luck, fortuity. But
Mm.
synonyms for synchronicity are simultaneity, contemporaneousness, co-occurrence, and concurrence, coincidence, simultaneousness. So yeah, I think you're right. There is some element where it's like, yeah, it has to be two things at the same, very close together time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm glad I established that after putting this episode together. No, this is good. I'm like always learning new stuff. And I think this is going to be really cool because the next part, let's see here. Oh, okay. So I was going to ask actually about if synchrony differs from coincidence. But it sounds like they're kind of the same thing. But a coincidence doesn't have to be at the same time, right?
I think Jung calls it a meaningful coincidence. So
Meaningful
it's something that has significance to the person perceiving it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I always thought they were similar, you know, events that are too thought-provoking or events that are too emotionally touching to just be a coincidence. Like it's just a step above. So that meaningful bit. And you're right. Jung does call it a meaningful coincidence. Trying to think here. So it's also been referred to as an event on the outside that speaks to something on the inside. So say that again. It's been referred to as an event on the outside that speaks to something on the inside. And that's going to be opposed to just something random. So, I mean, that gets into this idea of meaning. And it seems to me that synchronicity requires some kind of if there's this kind of meaning, that means that there has to be something to give it meaning, right?
Yeah, there has to based
Yeah,
off
there
of
has to be a
your value
meaning.
system.
Yeah, applier.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if it's happening to you, then you have to give it meaning in some sense.
Okay. Yeah. And so, and I'm asking these questions because of where we're going to kind of move this conversation to. But when I say the words fate, destiny, divine plan, would synchronicity kind of require those? Because again, like if we're attaching meaning to it, like where do we pull meaning from? Like with like spiritual meaning or relational meaning, divinity meaning, like you
Well,
know what I
it's
mean?
that, like what you said, it's that reflection of the outward of the inward, right? So it's we created the meaning within ourselves, and then we see it reflected outward. Perhaps at the moment we think of it, and that becomes a synchronistic moment. So, I taking the very easy concept of thinking of a friend and them calling you. It's like you already had that system within you of, thinking about your friend. And then it's like, it's a reflection, it's like the 2 points meet at this apex where you can't kind of tell which one came first. Did your friend call you and then you think of them, like a split second before or after, or how did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if it necessarily lies with destiny or fate, because I kind of see it more as that tapping into the collective unconscious grid that we all live under, that we all participate in subconsciously. And perhaps there's some times in which, you get hit with a lightning rod of information and you think of the thing before it happens. So yeah, I don't know if that really correlates very much with destiny or fate, but it could.
Right. Well, I guess so. Let's go.
think-
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I think it's definitely a tapping into that collective unconscious type thing. But I think it's like a locality thing, right? With respect to time. So like you're tapping into that collective unconscious, and you're calling that person's calling you. You've sent the message out, hey, call me, and they call you or whatever. But the fate may be that you guys are meant to be friends forever. So these little tappings into the collective unconscious build sort of the tracks to that end fate. So like synchronicity might be the railroad well, your physical body would be the train itself, and then fate or destiny, whether it be small or large, would be the final destination that you're heading towards. But you have to get past each one of those little train tracks, each one of those little phone calls or messages or relays out into the collective unconscious and back to make it to that train station.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mike or Nick.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, I can see it as a sort of foundational thing to, I don't know, creating the lattice work of a destiny. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think that's kind of where I was thinking about this. Again, I wrote these notes last week, so it's not very fresh in my head. But like taking the number example, for example, the number example, for example. So I also will see like 111 or 123 or 999, and this used to happen a lot before I had any really thoughts about it.
What time are you seeing 999? That is a different dimension.
No, I know. No,
Okay.
that would be like receipts that would
Yeah,
come
no, I'm
up,
kidding.
or yeah,
That's
like
awesome.
it just pops up. But or like nines and ones. I'll see a lot of nines and ones. Now, I don't know if there's just because some numbers get used more frequently than others. That's like a debate for I don't know, a statistician or
Cultural thing too, right?
yeah, cultural thing too. Like, on your keyboard, your vowels are going to wear out far faster than your non-vowels. Consonants? What's a non-vowel?
Consonant.
Consonant. Okay. Anyway, so my point is, okay, so I've just seen all these numbers, but I didn't really make anything about it. And then, I reconnect with the friend, very hippy dippy, and she starts telling me like, oh no, you need to look up Doreen Virtue. And I remember I did this years ago, and she at the time had this article, and it was like, here's what 111 means, here's what 999 means, and all these different things. And so then if you dive into like numerology, those numbers will mean different things. If you get into, I don't know if like Wiccans do anything with numbers, but I just feel like you're always going to find something different, and people ascribing meaning to something that might just be synchronicity and sort of neutral. So I think that's kind of where I was going with that question.
I think that they call it the pareidolia. I forget what that. I think that's what it is. It's noticing patterns in otherwise patternless structures. So like seeing like a cloud, and saying it looks like a bunny.
Yeah, your face, your eyes look for that. Your brain looks for it. Jesus, those things. I mean, there's also fields of study of mathematics that run along similar things, right? Like number theory, and you get into like sets of numbers and why certain numbers are so important, why certain symbols that represent numbers become really important. Like why is a 3 a 3? That sort of stuff. Yeah, it has that sort of pull has a lot of stuff that study of numbers has a lot of pull that just does come from even outside of numerology without the woo-woo stuff. But you can definitely attach meaning to it once you've discovered sort of that knowledge.
Yeah, well, and again, yeah, exactly. And so like a meaning coincidence, it would be a coincidence to see 111 on my microwave, and then I look at my phone and I see 111. I mean, I guess maybe not if they're the same time, but usually that doesn't happen, right? They're like a minute or two off. But if it does, you'd be like, huh. And so that's a coincidence. But then if you extrapolate from that, like, oh, I should go look up 111 now. Like, is that synchronicity? Is that adding that meaning? Or is it
I don't
just
think so.
The importance of seeing these things back to back?
I think you're kind of creating the meaning. So say if you were looking at like, okay, 111, right? And you saw that day, and then all of a sudden, I don't know.
You win a lottery ticket for $1,111.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Or you choose 111 as the lotto ticket and you win big. That would be something I would say that is kind of synchronistic. Or, a car hits you on your way to go get the lottery ticket and the license plate has a 111 in it.
That's messed up. That's just messed up.
Yeah, that microwave example too. Like you're cooking something, and at 1 minute 11 seconds left, you look at your clock or your
And
watch.
it's 111.
Yeah, and it's either like 11:11 or it's 1:11.
Right. Right. And it's like, why? Why? And and I think about this because I'm not always being like, oh, like that would drive me insane if I was always trying to find meaning with that kind of stuff.
It's like
But
the Jim Carrey in the number 23.
what?
Yeah,
The movie The Number 23 with Jim Carrey.
Oh, I've never seen this.
Yeah, he was obsessed with the number 23.
just kept seeing it everywhere. And it drove me mad.
Yeah, see, exactly. It would drive you mad. But I guess here's my question is that was it the repetition of those numbers, or was it the moment you learned that those numbers could possibly have some sort of meaning that you would start to notice it more?
Well, I don't really know because there's a whole new agey thing about numbers that I don't know if exactly applies. It would mean something if it was a sort of repetitive thing, but I don't know if just looking at the clock and it being a 111 or 1111 intrinsically means anything. I think I think that's only half of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, and we can come back to this. Let me just move along because I think, because I'm going to get into Jung in just a minute, and I think the meaning part was something I wanted to pull out for sure. So we can revisit that. So I wrote this other question. How do we know when it is, I think, serendipity versus when we're just forcing connections because we want it to be that way or we're biased to think that? So again, I guess it's kind of similar to what I was talking about, like the meaning aspect. And I could be misunderstanding this, but does that question make a little bit of sense? Make you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely we are meaning making machines, and in a lot of respects, like that's just kind of what we do. So yeah, I mean, like there probably are times, and I would say that whole new age sort of thing is a time in which people are just deciding to ascribe a certain amount of meaning to something that otherwise might be just arbitrary because it's not coupled with another phenomenon that matches it. It's just saying, oh, you look at a clock and it's 111, that means that you're on the right path, like
Right.
that doesn't really mean anything, like it's much more, I think it's much more physical and in your face and almost immediate, rather than trying to ascribe meaning to something that it probably isn't there. But it is our plight to do so. I mean, we're only human. That's what we like to do.
Yeah. And get those meanings shattered. No, I'm just kidding. Mike, any thoughts on that?
I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's arbitrary by nature, right? And you're kind of putting this meaning onto it, but it might be a little bit important to realize just like the basic human behavior, like that repetitious behavior. Why do you always check the clock at 11 past the hour or something like that, at 111? Why is that happening to you? Because there's a coincidence. So you maybe do it 2 days in a row, right, or 3 days in a row, but after a while it becomes a discernible pattern of like, why is my internal clock making me check the clock at this time all the time? And maybe that might have some value, but yeah, we are meaning assigning machines, and there are things that could be completely arbitrary with no meaning at all. But synchronicity, like Nick was saying, it's much more in your face. It kind of pops out, even with like this neutral like numbers thing. It will pop out in front of you, whatever it is, right? Whether it be, so I remember I got
And Mike,
dinner.
sorry, your audio is just a little bit low. I don't know if you're away from the mic.
Mike has left the mic.
Yeah, Mike has left the mic. No, I know.
Yeah.
Well, Nick went, and I was like, then my ear dropped.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just had it up for Mike. But yeah, I don't know. Your audio is just a little bit low, but I'm listening.
Let's see. Is that better?
Yes.
A little bit better.
A little
Yes.
bit better.
No, it could be low battery or something. So there's like a time when certain meals, like the certain price of certain meals, has correlated with certain numbers that were attributed to like a unit thing I was working with, and this unit thing was just going real bad. But for some reason, the price of this meal that I had that was also bad came back as the same number as that unit,
Huh.
and for whatever reason, I assigned the two meanings to be connected because it was in a certain place where, yeah, it was in the same place where I was working with the unit. So it was like this just strange bit of coincidences. But I don't know if I assigned that meaning to it or it was just something that I noticed. But it wasn't like
Yeah.
you're on the right path or something like that. It could have just been, it just felt a little synchronous. It was a little bit in my face because it was like prices don't end with two zeros. That's one of the only bills I've ever had that like that wasn't like at a bar or something like that. It was like a meal, proper meal that the tax and tip included ended on a flat price.
That is weird. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's happened to me a couple times, and I'm like, why? I'm like, charge me for something. This is weird.
Well, yeah, I think also, I think that if you have to ask if there's a meaning to the coincidence that is like synchronicity, then it's probably not synchronicity. Because I think that you know immediately, and you don't really have to consult with anybody that that meant anything because you just know that it meant something. So I think that there is something about a bit about like that intuitive sort of feeling that you get when something synchronistic happens. I was just saying in sort of reference to people ascribing meaning, and then this concept of seeing certain numbers and what that could mean, and then you find somebody who tells you what the meaning is. Instead of that, you have this thing that happens to you, and you already know the meaning right away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like, it's almost as if, yeah, like synchronicity is just an event. Like, there's no meaning to it, but it happens to be something that once it happens, we tend to draw meaning from it. Um, but they're two unrelated things. And I think the reason we try to put meaning onto it is because we don't really understand what is happening with synchronicity. Like you were talking about the unconscious grid. Like that's kind of a newish concept. Um, it's not like they were talking about unconscious grids in the 50s,
Yeah,
or
they were. It's
were
called
they?
collective unconscious. It's a Jungian
Oh,
concept.
right. But before him, like who was talking about it?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were other people who thought about, humans being collectively tied by the mind somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah. Well, okay. So, let's see. So, I have this question. Do you ever feel like synchronicity is a sign that you're on the right track? We can go back to that later. Because this next little bit is just going to dive into Jung, because he did introduce the idea of synchronicity in his book and a causal connecting principle. But the reason he did it was to strip off the fantasy, the magic, and the superstition which surrounded and are provoked by unpredictable, startling, and impressive events like these that appear to be connected. So I think, like, in some ways, he also understood that there's serendipity and it can be wielded to confirm magical thinking.
hmm,
But he wanted to look at it from a different perspective, from like a
demystify it.
consciousness. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of why I was getting into these meaning questions. Because, yeah, okay, so for him, his view is that just as casual connections can provide a meaningful understanding of the psyche and reality, so too may a causal connections. So he has this quote: "We often dream about people from whom we receive a letter by the next post. I have ascertained on several occasions that at the moment when the dream occurred, the letter was already lying in the post office of the addressee."
Hmm.
So, I read that and I'm like still a little bit confused. Like, what comes up for you when you hear that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. It is a bit confusing, but I do believe that perhaps Jung was trying to demystify something that is intrinsically mystical. I don't know if I'm interested in kind of like sciencing away the concept, because I do think that there is something there. And I think it's more than just what we can quantify and sort of scientifically prove away. But I do think that it seems like he was trying to struggle with this concept of like, well, there is no rational explanation for as to why I dreamt about that person sending me a letter, like, so I got to figure out my best way to explain this so that I don't become, some, magic loving,
Balloon.
crackpot. Yeah.
Hey, what's wrong with that?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I'm just saying that Jung definitely wanted to keep his credibility. So perhaps he didn't want to start talking about, clairvoyance and magic and all that.
Oh, humans are boring.
Yeah.
So I also think of two other examples when it comes to synchronicity. The first one is like the twin phenomenon, when one twin can sense what's happening to the other twin. Like if one of them feels sick or gets, wounded or something, the other twin will pick it up near immediately. It seems pretty synchronicitous, and they get the feeling that the other twin, there's something wrong with the other twin.
Yeah. It makes me wonder kind of, and I want to maybe know what you guys think too, do you think it's on an energetic level? Like, are we, because if we take this to this sort of quantum level, right? We know that electrons have that sympathetic resonance sort of tethering that you can take, if you entangle or entrain two electrons together, meaning making them sympathetically resonant to each other, you can separate them by vast distances, and affecting one will cause the other to immediately respond no matter the distance. So I'm wondering if perhaps are we touching some sort of energetic field, and picking up on electrons or something like that.
Yeah. I think when you get attuned to people, like we're pretty much attuned to our friends, and it takes time to, like break down those barriers with strangers. So I can see that happening on just a wavelength level, because you have thoughts, you need output somehow, so that's through waves, through vibrations, and once those vibrations coalesce and kind of go together, I don't think there's any distance that can, once they become sympathetic, I don't think there's any distance that can kind of break that. And some people, you might tune yourself stronger to some than others.
Right. And I think that this phenomenon is maybe perhaps a relic from our more primitive years, when we needed to be much more dependent on each other, and especially maybe communicate without having to use words. And it would seem to me that perhaps if you're in tune with your environment, that's when you can pick up those other sort of synchronistic moments, because it's not always, the other entity that you merge with or you kind of apex with isn't always a human. It could be an object. You could think of a yellow car and immediately look to your left and there's a yellow car coming, in the distance or something like that. So I wonder if there's this sort of ability for you to get on the sympathetic resonance of your local field in order to sort of perceive your environment in that way.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to add, like with the car example, a skeptic might say that you saw the car out of the corner of your eye
Right.
before you realized that you did. And then same with the twin phenomenon. I think there's a lot of stuff that's probably out there. We should maybe do an episode just on that, because it's kind of interesting to look at the idea of like identical twins, for example, and then how they move through the world, and like, because it says a lot about predeterminism versus free will. But I was going to say the twin phenomenon phenomenon could just be a deterministic effect. So, like, when you live with somebody for a long time, and kind of like what Mike was saying, you can start to finish each other's sentences. You start to really understand like what they find funny. And so I just imagine if you're a twin and you have the same parents, same household, same upbringing, same media inputs, like your references are going to be the same. It's going to be much easier for you to anticipate what the other might say to something.
Well, even twins separated at birth who never actually met each other have this tend to have the same spouse type, have the same job type, have the same dog, like there are many cases where twins separated at birth have the same spouse of the same, or have a spouse of the same name, a dog of the same name, have the same job. It's really weird.
Yeah, or even
We need to
like
do an episode on that.
Yeah.
even like injuries, right? Like twins will get injured and the other one will not feel the actual pain, but will feel that something is wrong with that other twin.
Yeah.
Without any form of telecommunication or anything like but
so
no,
maybe it is just the 9 months you spend in utero that kind of entangle your neurons to each other's, and then your connection basically just stands the test of time.
and I think too, like on that yellow car example, I think it harkens back to, like you were saying, ancient times when we were both predators and prey. Because there's a time when I was, on a run and I felt like something was hunting me, or even like on the street. If I'm walking down the street late at night, you kind of pick up like a bad vibe in the area, and you can't quite put your finger on it. But you turn around and all of a sudden there's somebody behind you who looks, either they're tailing you or they're just walking behind you, but you kind of have that gut instinct to try to figure that out, whether it be turning down a street you don't turn down. Anyways, but I was running and I had this feeling that I was being hunted. Something felt real wrong. And I look up and I was running next to a hill, and I look up behind me and there's a mountain lion. And it was just walking, following me at the crest of the hill as I was running.
Shut up. This happened to you?
Yeah, this happened in Irvine.
No, dude, no. I was hiking today. That's my worst fear. Every time I go, I am like, I am not prepared to encounter a mountain lion today.
Well, especially with mountain lions, man. They'll just follow you casually for like 30 minutes and then Sabbath like just ambush you.
That's messed up. That's so
I crossed the street. I went back. So like on one side of the street, there was just a hill that I was running down at the base of. And then on the other side was our, the science sector of our university campus. And luckily there were some stairs I could duck down to get into a building. There's a road separating it. So I saw that and it just kept following me. I didn't even know how long it was following me, but I feel like that synchronistic tendency, that one picking up the vibe that I was being hunted, being prey to something, and then looking over and look, there's an animal there that's actually hunting me.
Now, here's a question, because you know how they say animals sense fear? Have you ever had that moment when you encounter a major predator and then all of a sudden you're like, I am vibrating like a bunny rabbit right now because I'm threatened and terrified, and then it looks at you like, oh, you're a bunny rabbit now, and you're like, no, and like have you, because I've had something that's like similar, but
thankfully I've never had to stare down a predator before, so no.
It's happened to me with a dog. A friend's Weiler. I was in the backyard and like all of a sudden I was really young. I was like in 4th or 5th grade. Got real scared, and it just started, and it changed its look at me. And I was like, no, and it started to come towards me. And I booked it and ran. And it chased me and ended up biting a hole in my shirt.
Oh, so, that's not fun.
Well, I jumped a fence, but it bit a big old hole in my shirt. But yeah, I've definitely had that moment.
And I was going to say, because like that's like not to get like that's a vibe shift. And I think that like, yeah, if predators can sense fear, then that's a sense that exists. And whether we perceive it all the time or not, it's out there. You know what I mean?
It's a smell.
Is it a smell?
Yeah, your pheromones light up, and basically they can just smell you. They can smell the fear on you.
Ugh, that's
Yeah.
not no, dude. Well, because like, so I went. Remember years ago in San Francisco, there was that Siberian tiger that like jumped a 17-foot moat and killed like two guys that were heckling it.
No.
Okay,
That's
well,
pretty gnarly.
yeah, I mean, it just was like it had no reason to jump until these two guys pissed it off, and it was like, no, I'm just gonna take care of you. And that happened like a couple weeks before I encountered a tiger in a zoo, but the zoo had a 2-foot moat and no fence, no nothing. They just said that the tigers were so well fed that they don't do anything. And obviously this is before I knew that some zoos internationally can be really abusive to tigers. But this tiger did look fat and happy. But the thing is like I walked around the corner and I saw it and it was chill. And then like the minute I saw the moat, I was like, oh, like if it wanted to, it could just come over here and hang out, and it was that moment when I had that reaction that all of a sudden it looked me dead in the eyes. And I just felt fear right through my body. And I was like, oh my God, I'm telling it to come over here with my fear pheromones. And I started
Mhm.
backing up because I was like, it's going to kill me. Now that could have all been in my head. But what if it wasn't? I mean,
No, it likely wasn't. Animals definitely, especially predators. Predators are built on picking up, in their environment and being perceptive. They have to in order to hunt. So they
right.
can perceive on higher levels than perhaps herbivores. Herbivores tend to be as sensitive too, though. So I think it's just all animals kind of have a hypersensitivity to
To smell.
odors, energies, because a lot of animals are telepathic too, in sense. Like they don't communicate in the sense that they don't communicate linguistically. They communicate
Yeah.
with their bodies and with their temperaments.
Stares and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, well, and I think that's kind of why this is a cool like sidetrack conversation because with synchronicity, we might give it some kind of meaning, but it also could be something guided by something we just can't measure with our limited human understanding of things. You know what I mean? Like it could be some other sense that we just have yet to discover.
I think you understood the situation quite well, though. Like you picked up on the idea that this thing
Gonna
was
eat
going to
me.
eat you. Yeah,
Well, and
but
here's the thing. I had a dream that I was attacked by a tiger when I went over there. And it looked very similar to that spot. So I don't know if like in some other dimension I got eaten by that tiger and there was like a weird moment, but I definitely did not turn my back to that tiger. And it was until I got around the corner that I was like, I'm booking it.
yeah. And it's that non-verbal form of communication that I think people can understand well, but in our civilized age, we've lost the ability to accept that we understand that kind of communication.
Hmm.
Maybe, I don't know, because there's been times when I've looked people dead in the eye and try to figure out simply who they are, and you can. The scariest moments is when you meet somebody where there's nothing behind there, right? Like there's,
Mhm.
and you pick up on this weird feeling that there's just emptiness. Like there's something in them that's like a void, and it's
Oh, like as a bad person. Yeah. Like
yeah,
just a bad vibe.
yeah, and you pick that
Or
up.
just a blank vibe.
I've
Yeah,
never had
just
the blink vibe. That's creepy.
I'm convinced 85% of the humans on Earth don't actually exist.
Oh my God, here we
I'm
go. It's
kidding.
theory again. Oh my gosh, this
And
is his
people
like
just get
once a month
Including
theory.
us.
Stop! Oh my God.
just
Blank
cogs in the
stares.
AI system. Yeah, no,
Jeez. I mean, right? We don't know that that's not the case, so
right.
grain of
But
salt.
I think it's that bit of synchronicity, right? Like I looked at this person in the eyes. I picked up that it's like a vibe, because like you feel bad vibes from people who you can label as assholes or whatever. And that's one vibe. But when you pick up this blankness, this emptiness. It's something that feels completely different, but that's like a meaningful coincidence or something, right? It's that synchronous moment where you're syncing up with that other person and picking up who they may actually be in a few seconds. And the only other times I've really seen this is when you look at like mug shots of serial killers. Right? You look them in the eye, and there's like there's nothing there. There's
Shark eyes.
absolutely yeah, that sort of stuff.
You
But
say shark eyes?
Mm-hmm. Sharks don't have souls. So
What?
sharks don't have what?
No,
Nick,
sharks
you're
don't
coming
have
out here
souls.
with these
There's what about Shark's Tale? That was a great movie. That had soul to it.
Sure.
Fish are friends, not food. I mean,
Why don't you give a high five to a great white and see? Come back and tell me how friendly it is.
You know
Hold on, I'll
what?
be right back.
Yeah.
I know, right? No, but you know, actually, that reminds me of the second predator encounter. I was surfing one time, and there were some sharks under me, and I was with a friend. And you know, we were a little on edge about that, but they were those tiny like baby sharks that
Nurse sharks.
yeah, like the non-bad sharks. But the weird thing is they were just directly under us. They weren't going anywhere else. And then all of a sudden, like, you know, we're out there for a little while talking, and then my friend is like, we need to go in right now. And basically like and it was a very clear day. He said the great white had like come up right behind me and did that first slow pass and then went away. And that's usually when they're like going to come back again and like eat you. But it was funny because like I was aware that the sharks below me caused me no harm. And yet I had this deeply eerie, disturbing, this is way too quiet. Something's
They were
not
waiting
right
for you to
feeling.
be bitten.
Yes, exactly. They were waiting for the little bits that fall. And yeah, and again, I know my friend. I mean, like, yeah, like that. I mean, that. Yeah, I can't. I haven't been surfing since. Like, that has been such a scary moment. But anyway, now I'm all like triggered by that.
Well, and I think that if you look at the animal kingdom too, you probably see a lot more of that tapped inness that we're kind of alluding to when we talk about synchronicity. So you think about like a predator catching a fish at the exact right moment, you know what I mean? Or, popping out and at the right moment, or a herd of deer, you know, like noticing an imperceptible movement in the grass and then running away just in time. You know, so it's like there's this qualia about nature and the animal kingdom. It's so sympathetic with each other and it's so connected that it's like it's already tapped into that state. And since humans are pretty removed from that, I think that synchronicity is kind of like a reminder of that umbrella that we all fall under, that sort of psychic umbrella.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you know what, to follow that, here's another quote from Jung. It's a little longer. It says, synchronistic phenomena prove the simultaneous occurrence of meaningful equivalencies in heterogeneous, causally unrelated processes. In other words, they prove that a content perceived by an observer can, at the same time, be represented by an outside event, without any causal connection. From this, it follows either that the psyche cannot be localized in space, or that space is relative to the psyche. And the same applies to the temporal determination of the psyche and the psychic relativity of time. I do not need to emphasize that the verification of these findings must have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, I mean, that goes right back into what we talked about with the CIA, Project Gateway stuff, right?
That's what I read in my notes. I totally
our hologram,
on the same page.
Our hologram creating its own hologram, and the feedback loop of like letting you know that your little hologram projector is working properly.
Your little hologram. Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, it depends. He said it's either, and that's the coolest thing is he's like, what, synchronicity is what it is, but it either means that the psyche cannot be localized in space, And that makes sense, right? Let the psyche's consciousness, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
and the
it wouldn't be
consciousness
in
can be
space.
localized at all.
Yeah, it's ether. But then he says, or space
Is
is
tied to
relative
consciousness.
to the psyche. Yeah. And I mean,
Mhm.
that's just really interesting too, because
I mean, I think it could be both, you know.
could be both. Yeah. Logic systems say either does represent an or an and. So yeah, I mean, it definitely could be an and. Um, and then the
Or
temporal determination of the psyche, huh?
no, I'm just trying to just keep going. You're good. I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
muttering to myself over here.
Yeah, I'm muttering too. I mean, this is just yeah, it's a very gateway experience. And I am just it's just I'm surprised because like when I think about Jung, I don't think that he would be talking about like this kind of stuff, but because it seems really out there, but
It's
it's
quite
very
woo-woo-ish. But yeah, no, I think it's something to connect back to just our old ancient roots, right? Because your hologram can definitely be off. This is what happens. Like going back to the stairs, it becomes very important to read body language of anyone, right? Like, and there might be I think increased trauma in the childhood home allows you to tap into these things. You're a bit more sensitive,
Mhm.
or exposed trauma in life. Like basically any like soldier, 1,000 yard stare type person, I think has a implicit connection to this sort of non-localized psyche, and in a weird way able to isolate themselves within it. Hence the 1,000 yard stare, which is different than the blank killer stare. And I think like those are outputs of connecting to the psyche in two different ways, or rather, one connecting to it and the other one not being able to connect to it at all. And how we interact with those people makes are like the edge cases of synchronicity, I guess. Or yeah, those edge cases being far more like the extreme in how you can perceive it.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like well, because yeah, I mean, because it has me thinking about stuff. So, for instance, like okay, let's say you were reading a book, and without telling you the plot of the book, there's character A and there's character B. Suddenly, character A narrows their eyes when looking at character B. What would you say happened there? How does character A feel towards character B?
Suspicion.
They need
Suspicion?
they need glasses.
They need glasses, maybe they're angry. But like and this came to mind while you were speaking because the concept of like a narrowed countenance or something like that, your narrowed focused gaze, that does have a leaning towards a predator kind of focused
Mhm.
eyes on forward. It denotes a certain tone, but it's also a situation that I've read countless many times. It's less of words making meaning and more of like a turn of phrase, like she narrowed her eye. Everybody knows what you mean when you're saying that. It's less about the parts, it's about that little section. And so anyway, it just has me thinking about, our consciousness is filtered through the words that we use to describe the reality we're in. But when you start thinking about the way that that reality is primed or maybe a little bit more determined based on like all the information that you get, um it's like we've found a way to manifest those one-on-one vibes, but through other words and meaning. I mean, obviously that's what language is, but um
Get into the abstracts. So, do you mind if I cut you off?
no, I
Sorry.
think I thought the last piece was just to then look at how that reinforms our psyche, our understanding of things and the way that we use our brain to understand our world. In what ways it could be limiting or something like that. But go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Then like it's So in search, I'm just looking at the synchronistic phenomena prove the simultaneous occurrence of meaningful equivalents in heterogeneous causally unrelated processes. So in going way out of in the computer science world, there's a search task, right? Like a search bar, whenever you look for stuff. And there's a way that you can get into an abstracted space of two completely unrelated things. So heterogeneous data, things that are maybe it could be data sources like speech and voice, but you abstract it to the point where you try to find a similarity with a certain type of document. And now let's say this document is now a feeling, right? In an emotion of sorts, right? Like character A squints their eyes at character B. Could be that character A just needs glasses and cannot see character B, right? But in our in our search orientated mind, in our abstracted zone, we only see that as someone's character A is angry at character B, or is behaving in a predator like manner. So we do this quick search in this abstracted world of these causally unrelated things, and pull down, and like you were saying, in a limited way. In our psyche, it means that person A is angry at person B, when it could not even be true at all. And I think that synchronistic phenomenon might be that sort of that search for these finding the search for meaning in these unrelated processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and to your point, there's this other quote that I'll add, which is it's also from Jung. It says, "We must remember that the rationalistic attitude of the West is not the only possible one, and is not all embracing, but is in many ways a prejudice and a bias that ought perhaps to be corrected." And so I think to your point, Mike, is that, yeah, we do have a very rationalistic attitude towards the squinting of person A to person B, like you're assessing, because I didn't give you plot, I didn't give you anything else. I just said A narrows eyes at B, and we already can infer a couple of things. But you're right, like those are kind of if-thens, and you can zoom way out and to think about like all kinds of other things, which is not like the best example, but
that's why I think that's why symbols are so important to humanity, right? Because you're able to pack a lot more information into something simple that doesn't necessarily have to be explicitly parsed out every time. And so you can kind of pack more punch in a symbolic way than perhaps linguistically. And that's why symbols have been with us for so long. I mean, I'm so fascinated with them. I think that that if you can draw a few lines and portray and convey a complicated sort of structure of ideas, that's incredibly powerful. I mean, we talk about sort of like the memes or memetics in the modern day, but memes are just basically cave paintings of today. And so, yeah, I think there's something about the abstract communication being much more potent than perhaps a literal communication. And that's where this concept of narrowing the eyes comes from. That's a more abstract sort of thing. We've ascribed already layers of meaning to that already. And so we can use that as a hotkey to, cue the psyche about intent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that affects the way you view your world. That creates your whole little hologram, right? Because that hotkey may be a bad hotkey. Like
it could be erroneous.
Yeah, without can even being there. Like there's that little bit of communication that goes even outside of body language, right? It's that, because I think if you're in the room and you see person A squint at person B, you can figure out real quick what's happening. But if someone tells you somebody's like person A squints at person B, I don't know what's going on. It's just someone squinting at somebody.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not involved. I'm going to see my way out.
And then I could draw a circle with 2 dots and a upside down arc, and you would say, "Oh, that's anger." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like
Right.
you can abstract it down to its most simple form and crystallize it into an idea. And I think that that's what humans do best, is try to take these really complex ideas and then reduce them to their most simplistic form, and they will use those as symbols so that we can carry the knowledge over thousands of years. And so yeah, I think that that's really interesting. I mean, like even the mandala on this intro card here, I mean, it could explain something like synchronicity if you think of the repeating patterns all kind of coinciding and connected to each other, juxtaposing each other, that sort of mirror phenomenon of somebody experiencing something as soon as they think it. So there's a lot of ways in which abstract sort of communication can give us shortcuts to larger scale ideas.
Yeah, no, and I really like that quote also because, I studied philosophy, and so I do have this more linear, causal, rigid mindset, which is really good for some things. But I do think that for human things, for understanding nature, there is a certain uh there's like a certain need to release that if you truly want to understand. And I think this is something that's especially interesting now. We're at a time where there's a lot of meaning to be made. And I think sometimes the more you try to define something, it gets much harder to just understand your narratives or what's going on or what might happen next or UFOs or whatever. But I do think that like if you can step back and try to kind of think about things more abstractly, or like Nick, you were saying, to kind of look back at maybe history and what we've already thought about the reality of the world and how it could apply now, you might be closer to understanding the ways of the universe. I don't know. I mean, what approach do you if you were like going to sit down and say, I'm going to do my best to understand the universe, like what approach would be best for that?
Well, it depends on if you're trying to understand the universe or humanity.
That's the universe.
But
Man,
I would say study astrophysics. There you go. But if you're trying to understand humanity, I would say study symbols. Symbols are probably the best representation of what humanity's philosophy.
I think you need you have to value education and woo-woo. You need both. You need like you were saying,
woo.
like
Woocation.
like you were saying earlier about the Western bias, the fact that anything can be rationally taught without, like that you need school, like that stuff is good, and it has been the prevailing thought for a while now, and it's gotten us some pretty far places. But I think if you're trying to have a whole holistic understanding of the universe, you have to allow the woo, and you have to let sort of synchronicity, these things that maybe even shouldn't be explained in, and just roll with the intuition that they provide you. Right? Like, yeah, because the universe can, I mean, you could break it down mechanically. You can spend all day doing that, but it doesn't give you, I feel like you're still missing a part of the puzzle, right? It's that reading on paper the character A and B thing versus being in the room with character A and B. Like there's something there, I think, that is that goes missing when you just let everything be rationalized.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think too, it's like okay, so like emotions, for example, we like to try to say keep a lid on it, or I don't know. I mean, like emotions are often seen as like inconvenient things, at least for me. It's never been convenient to be emotional. But at the same time, like our emotions are a part of us and they're a tool. They help, we have instincts, we have gut feelings, we sense vibes, we process, we release. I mean, like we laugh. There's a lot of things to us that aren't part of this rigid kind of causal worldscape. So yeah, you have to definitely lean a little bit into the opposites to, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just
Right
thinking of
side
like,
brain.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I'm thinking like yin
Abstract.
and yang too, like there's a balance I think that's needed when understanding a whole. Um,
Yeah. Like, yeah, that the emotions are an interesting thing because they might at times they're the only ways that you can communicate properly what's on your mind, right? Like you laughing and crying are two outputs of emotion that have come from a point where words can't explain what's going on, right? You also see
mm.
this in you see this tool used most, or this idea used most in musicals. In musicals, everybody talks until the emotion gets to a point where they can't, where talking doesn't do it anymore, so they sing. And then once they start singing, once the emotion becomes too big for that, they start dancing. And that's sort of
Oh, that's true. I never thought about it that way.
so it's the expression of said emotion because words cannot accurately convey any emotion ever.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this leads really nicely to this next bit, which I didn't know. I bought this book. It's called Synchronicity by Paul Basic. It's a very unfortunate last name. It's Mr. Basic. But basically, it was yeah, Young made a little friend who was a theoretical physicist. And let's see. So it was Austrian physicist Wolfgang Pauli, and he was quite emotional. He was distraught and drinking heavily after his divorce in 1930. So he sought out, sorry, Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung for therapy. So I said SWAT, but it was Swiss and sought. So anyway, I just had to say that was kind of funny, like SWAT. But so anyway, so Young got kind of a schooling in quantum physics, and then he also helped this physicist through his feelings and things like that, and did dream work with him. But it was kind of cool to see how like measuring the state of one particle can seem to influence the state of another instantly. So that entanglement thing. Young started to really start thinking about that. And here's a quote from the book again, Synchronicity. I believe it just came out last year. And I love books like these where they take these like historical figures and they find some little relationship, friendship moment that's like just there's just so much. It's so dense and like rich with things to think about. So anyway, the quote says, one consistent experience in all these experiments is the fact that the number of hits scored tends to sink after the first. Oh, okay. So this was about. Okay, this is okay. So I ordered the book. It hasn't arrived yet. So I don't exactly know what the experiment was. It had something to do with people like throwing a ball into a hoop and people who do it just as they do it, and then people who believe that it's going to make it in. And so, for some inner or outer reasoning, the score would rise for the subjects who had enthusiasm, positive expectation, hope, and belief in the possibility of ESP to make good results. So it was like this weird study where they were talking just about belief and making something happen. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
No, I mean it's perfectly reflected in sports, right? You got to have you have to get your head in the game, right?
Yeah.
That's what that means. It means getting yourself into a positive mindset in order to achieve a win. The converse of that is getting the yips, where you start to doubt yourself, especially in
The
baseball.
yips.
And you can't do anything. When an athlete gets the yips, they just start failing, and it's because they're overthinking and then thinking of themselves critically. And it seems that thought of self and the outcome of the results or the outcome of the execution really is important when you're trying to complete a task. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that your mindset would be tied to an execution of a task.
Mm-hmm.
And even going back to that Encounters of the Fifth Kind, that random number generator, how
Yeah.
sometimes it seems like they're able to influence the outcome of that. Very similar thing, but no, as Nick said, those yips, and it happens everywhere. Like anytime you get into your own head, it could be a bad thing, no matter what the task is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, and it's just funny, right? That those turns of phrase, we just buy into it and we know it to be true. But if we address it head on, we sound crazy. You know what I mean? Which is weird.
Well,
And
that's
I
like
think,
it's like the concept of yips. That's like a a linguistic symbol. It means a lot more than just those four letters. It conveys an emotion, a concept, a really deep thing. And sometimes when you have to parse those things out, it does sound crazy because you're like, oh, and then this is why this sounds like this, and it's like, it came from 1,000 years ago when this happened. It's just like, so. But yeah, when you try to unpack symbols, it becomes like a really big mess because you're like, oh, well, and this thing, and then this thing, and this thing. It's like Mary Poppins bag. It's just stuff keeps coming out of it. So
Amazing.
yeah,
it's a really good analogy.
It's like just blocks you from hitting that flow state where you synchronize with whatever, non-verbally get the thing done in a good way.
Yeah, well, and I'm just thinking because like this always makes me think of Rumi and like his poems and how so much of them are kind of like linguistic, what did you call them, symbols, but they're poems. But he's never talking about something head on. He invites you to kind of go near it and to feel it, kind of thing. And so I just think that's kind of really interesting because even here, Jung is talking about some kind of out there stuff. It sounds a little bit like The Gateway. It sounds a little bit like, The Secret. It sounds a little woo. And he's trying to maintain his cred, so he's nesting it with this theoretical physicist. But then even theories, like any, when you're studying it, if you're a theoretical physicist, you're just kind of thinking and throwing things out there and, trying to kind of make connections and stuff. But I was thinking about this when writing this piece. So much of science is it's in the predictive nature, right? So like you have a formula and you test the formula because you run simulations and you're always getting what the formula predicts you're going to get. So it's like science is almost like the replacing fortune telling, even though it's scientific, but what we're really doing is trying to find out what we kind of already knew. Does that make sense?
We have to be a little careful with terms.
No, I know, obviously. I'm not saying at all, like, no, I'm a big science believer, but I think that, like, there's this,
what is there to believe?
No, I know.
Science is a process. It's not I bow to the almighty science.
No, I do. I just don't.
No, you don't. You don't.
Like,
science
tags.
is a process.
No,
you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to bow to it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think what I'm trying to allude to is there's something about being able to predict things that science does really well. Prior to science, we had other ways of, like, maybe not synchronicity, but like this, like getting back to the 111 thing. Not that that's like a thing, but damn it! Now I'm really self-conscious and I lost it. But anyway,
there's general intuitions that we have shown. Like you don't need the formula to gravity to know that gravity works, right? I can just drop something on the ground and look, the thing fell to the ground. I don't know why it fell to the ground; it just fell to the ground. But through the scientific theory, through testing our hypothesis that there's this weak force that attracts objects of mass together, we have now found that if you drop a thing, the bigger mass is going to take it or whatever. There's actually a rate to it. There's a number that we can ascribe to it.
Right, and then you can use that and build on that for other stuff to predict other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that science often is just sort of it's what, how do I say this? It is sort of it is trying to rediscover stuff that we intuitively or abstractly understood in the past. So especially, like, especially with newer advents of science and newer discoveries of things, we find that a lot of the time the new discovery that we had was rooted in some sort of mythology of the past, or some sort of metaphor that was cast away as nothing or junk. And I think a lot of the times, to buttress against your comment, Ayla, about sort of rediscovering something we already knew, I think that a lot of the times what science is doing is sort of conceptualizing, intellectualizing an intuitive knowing, something that we might have abstractly known a long time ago, but didn't know the minutia, like Mike was saying, with the how gravity works. We don't know the mechanisms of it, but we know that it exists. And I think that a lot of the pursuit of science is to know the mechanisms of the things that we intuitively thought or supposed.
Right.
So that we can gain control and build weapons.
Yes.
Well, but I think you're right, Nick, because okay, so throughout this conversation, we were talking about synchronicity. Earlier, you thought, could it be some sort of part parcel with precognition?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, Mike said, could it be sort of a negative Murphy's Law, which I kind of like that too. And I didn't have anything, but Young talks about like unconscious grids and stuff like that. And so I guess, you had mentioned something, Nick, about the rest of it's just junk or whatever. And I think it kind of feels to me like synchronicity is junk today. That doesn't mean it's always going to be junk. It means that we recognize it and we understand that it could be part of something else. It could be casually associated with Murphy's Law. It could be casually associated with, holographic consciousness as we know it or whatever. But it is enough for us to call it something, which is a placeholder for when we one day have something better to define it by. A race
I think
or something,
Yeah, I think what we do, I mean, I do think that we have a representation of it within our mythologies. I think that this would be called, like divine affirmation.
See, and I was talking about meaning at the beginning of this talk. That's why, because it goes right back into that. So, sorry.
I agree.
What do you mean by divine affirmation?
Divine affirmation. So, I mean, this is a concept in mythology where the gods smile upon you doing the right thing, and you receive that sign to know that you're supposed to go, be on the right track. Like, that sort of mechanism seems to be closely tied to this concept of synchronicity, at least in some sort of abstract way. So, I mean, we've had this concept in our mythology for a long time, and so perhaps there is some truth rooted in the mythology somewhere that would give us an intuition or a insight onto what synchronicity could be for the human psyche, not just in the scientific terms, but perhaps in the psychological terms.
Well, yeah. And getting back to this kind of like having science catching up with some sort of knowing that we had or whatnot. When you were talking, Joan of Arc came to mind. The first time it happened, was it that she dreamed or she could talk? She felt like God could talk to her. How was the mechanism there? It was
Well, she had schizophrenia and thought that ghosts were talking to her. No, I don't know. But yeah, I knew. I'm not exactly sure. Probably in dreams, most likely. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but however it was, be it schizophrenia, be it that she's tapping into something else and just calling it God. There's lots of people who say God talks to me, but she's one of the people who God talked to her and she kicked ass. There was a certain synchronicity about it. And so I would just say, like, a situation like that, do we dismiss it as, just a great warrior who had schizophrenia or something else going on? Or do we say, that's an outlier of some human that was able to tap into something that we still don't know. But then, like, what if there's other outliers and like 100 years from now, we're like, oh, holy shit, like there's this, I don't know, this pheromone that when you smell it, you like suddenly can, I don't know. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like you just have discoveries all the time. So I think it's kind of interesting to think of synchronicity as like like a byproduct of something bigger that we just don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Or perhaps that we've cast away as junk that doesn't matter, in a more scientific sort of culture. I could see where synchronicity might be a big thing in more religious cultures, whether that's, Judeo-Christian religions or shamanic religions. I would assume that synchronicity has to be much more meaningful in those communities. And so perhaps what we're seeing here is that we're kind of casting some things aside from the relics of a more religious era, and maybe we need to update those so that we can kind of continue with them in a secular way.
I mean, I think we though allow them in like in a romantic sense, right? Like love at first sight, things like that. Like I said, like in the beginning of the show, that Casablanca line, right? Of all the gin joints in the world, why does she have to walk into mine? That sort of.
They don't even end up together though. She like marries someone else. Sorry, I get
Wow.
No,
Where's
that
the
movie
spoiler
pisses
warning?
me off. I'm
They're not
sorry. That's an
supposed to
old
end up-
movie. No, I know.
He cares about her so much that he's happy that she's with her husband and that they were meant to be
Amazing.
together.
It's what every girl wants. The
What a
guy that loves
simp.
her so much.
They both love her though. Like the husband loves her and the other guy loves her. But he's fine being Rick. Like he's kind of his character's already molded. That psyche's already molded into the guy that's like, don't. When a girl asks him like, "What about last night? Wasn't last night beautiful?" He goes, "I don't remember that far back." And she goes, "Well, what about tomorrow? I see you tomorrow." He goes, "I don't plan that far in the future." That's his sort of character. So it's like it's still an expression of love. It's just not the love that maybe girls watching it want. I don't know.
No,
But
it's a beautiful movie. I totally get it. I just like to give that movie shit because obviously I wanted them to be together, but I get it.
But then also she doesn't leave Casablanca then. Well, I guess they were both trying to get out of there. But anyways,
it's turbulent times.
like that notion of those two people ending up in the same place at the same time when usually it might not have happened, or like just in general the weird things that tend to happen in romantic nature. I think we allow synchronicity into that. We don't cast it off completely, right? Like the Ted example too. The hanging Chad and the pumpkin girl sort of thing, or the synchronistic nature. How it was like she was actually the roommate of a girl that, or the mother is a roommate of a girl that Ted dated in some season, right? So they were always around each other, moving around each other, or all kind of the same place, but never kind of bumped into each other. So like we do allow it, and obviously make entertainment centering around the whole idea, but I think we discredit it in other fashions where we don't allow woo-woo type stuff in.
Right. Well, and then it's just funny because you're talking about the like bumping into each other and stuff. Like, okay, so I just think, when thinking about this kind of stuff, I think about like free will and determinism, and I'm like, a lot of relationships, they say, start within like a 9-mile radius or something like that. Like usually people get together because of proximity. And so, just to play devil's advocate, I always wonder, like, and especially with the beginning of this talk with meaning is, are we, when it comes to synchronicity, is that really just a byproduct of going to the same place every day and you're just bound to meet up with this other person repeatedly because schedules aligned, you both like the same city because you both blah blah blah, like it's just all determined?
That synchronistic then.
Well, like, okay, if you're at the coffee shop and you're like, oh, I wish that cute guy showed up, and then you pop in, it would feel synchronistic. but
was
it wouldn't
immediate.
be.
Yeah, I
If
mean,
it was,
like, it,
yeah.
I
I was
mean, if
saying,
it
like,
was,
the probability of it happening is higher.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just discounting it in the sense that, like, it could be linking to something greater. It also could just be coincidence. So that's why I always I'm hung up on the meaning aspect of the definition of that word. That's
I
the
think
only
it has to stand out outside. It has to be a variant. You know what I mean? Like, so it has to be something that deviates from the norm.
Well, yeah, look, obviously, let's say, okay, so if you live a block away from me and there's a grocery store between you and I, it stands to reason that we're going to hit the grocery store at the exact same time
Probably, yeah. That wouldn't
every
be a
now and then.
deviation.
Why
It
would you
wouldn't
both
be
go to the same grocery store though?
convenience, it's right there.
Yeah, you live right there. I mean,
But then the happenstance is when, like, let's say you run into each other and then you see them and then a week later you do it again. But you were thinking
Still
about
not.
them.
I still wouldn't even say that. I mean, to be honest, I think that we really, like, in order to sort of like put meaning onto the concept of synchronicity, I really think that it has to be like a like a sharp departure from the normal variability.
True. But wouldn't you say if you didn't know that this person lived a block away in equidistance like you, wouldn't you perceive it to be synchronistic until you knew?
Well, until you saw them again and again and again and
Right.
again, you know. So yeah, I mean, like,
Right.
Also, too,
yes.
what's your intention when you go to the grocery store? Are you looking to see them or are you looking to shop? Because what if the time is
Yep.
super inconvenient for you?
Yeah.
But you know that just based off of past evidence, that person might be there at that time on that day. So you show up to the grocery store at that time.
Yeah.
I think
And then the
synchronicity
person
would
who
be
wasn't thinking that way thinks it's synchronicity, but you
synchroni-
orchestrated it.
Right, but I think synchronicity would be you both just broke up with somebody, you guys are at the same store, and then she happens or he happens to drop something right next to you and you pick it up. That's a synchronistic event. That's not, you know what I mean? So it's like
No, that's
it
a
has,
meet cute.
well, I mean, but that's what meet cutes are based on.
Yeah.
It's being in the right place at the right time, right? So it's like that's what they're based on. So I think that there has to be at least a standard in which we, you know, like we remove it from just a coincidence to meaningful coincidence. And I think what you're looking for is that sort of
Where
exit
does
from the
meaning
norm.
come from?
No, it's an instance that is not normal. I think that that's where really what it comes down to.
But I'm saying if
socially
you
engineered.
zoom,
Not
yeah,
socially engineered. But you're
but
right.
I feel
There's
like if you zoom out enough, there could be a case to say,
If you zoom out of anything enough, there could be always a case to say anything. So
True.
yeah.
True.
I mean, they're just probabilistically, you know, that can come out, but that feeling, I don't think should be like ignored. It's not like, oh, this wasn't a synchronistic moment, then so therefore I'm not going to talk to this person. This was obviously an engineered moment that, you know, should go, that I shouldn't even pay attention to. That gets a little silly. That's where it's like you kind of have to roll with what happens, right? It's like that joke about the person being caught in the flood and there's like 80 different things that happen to them and they're always like, no, I'm just waiting for God will save me, and then they end up drowning and they go talk to God and God's like, I sent you all these things, why didn't you?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah. I think it's the layers of meaning.
yeah, as long as, like, since meaning is subjective, as long as you find it synchronicitous, even if it was, you know, engineered by the
Other person.
the person that runs the grocery store, right?
That'd be evil.
like say the person that runs the grocery store calls up these two people because they asked for the same ingredient and thought they would be real good together. So now that one person's trying to engineer this meet between these two people, you still shouldn't discredit it as one of those two people if you find meaning in it. Then I think it still comes off as synchronicitous.
Or if you both drop your IDs on the same day in the grocery store and the manager calls you and you both end up at the grocery store at the same time to claim your IDs.
Yeah.
True. And well, and so, like, I guess, yeah, I still, the more I think about it, I'm a little confused, but I do want to share two things that I thought were kind of interesting, just because this topic kind of gets into meaning, and I think like subjective meaning versus objective meaning versus relational like there's just a lot of ways to slice it. So first, getting back to that like Western understanding of just things, there's this article talking again about Jung and this physicist, and it was talking about the difference between the ways of thinking. So it says the storytellers of modern physics are ever on the hunt for new ways to convey the tension between the contrasting realities of the general theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. Relativity argues for a universe in which causes lead to effects and nothing travels faster than light. Quantum physics tells of a quirkier world in which things seem to happen at random and connections appear seemingly instantaneously. Both challenge our intuitions. And then the other piece I wanted to leave with is this part where they say all the events in a man's life would accordingly stand into two fundamentally different kinds of connection. First, in the objective causal connection of the natural process, and second, in a subjective connection which exists only in relation to the individual who experiences it, and which is thus as subjective as his own dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was kind of a cool place to start to wrap things up, because again, thinking about whether outside events are localized, our psyche is localized in space, or the space is relative to the psyche, all these concepts and consciousness and stuff. I don't know. I still don't really know what to make of synchronicity after spending a couple hours putting this together and talking for an hour and a half. But I definitely would be interested to hear people's comments. And if you have any articles to help me understand this concept a bit more, I would really appreciate it. Nick and Mike, any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, it is a phenomenon that is not necessarily understood in the scientific, sort of sense, but there are plenty of things that we can understand abstractly. And I think that we all kind of know what the meaning of synchronicity is, but we can't exactly verbalize it. So maybe perhaps it just needs to stay in the abstract.
There just can't put your finger on it. It might be a healthy amount of ignorance and to cause an event to be labeled as synchronicitous, and it's a good thing, I think, really. That those meaningful coincidences, as you put them, or as Jung put them, that subjectivity can be very useful in larger goals. Like I don't think, like you said, we should explain it away. I think it's nice that it's more of a intuitive type thing rather than something that could be explained in linguistic symbols,
or scientific formula or whatever. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Ayla. That was great.
Yes, and may I just one more time. I love science, so.
Oh God!
Bow down. No, I'm just
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. I know I certainly did. Thank you to Ayla for bringing this to our conversation table, as it were. And thank you guys. If you feel so inclined, perhaps leave us a comment and a subscription on our YouTube page. It would really help us out. But other than that, thank you as always, and wanted to give a special shout out to our service people out there and the families of our service people. Happy Memorial Day, and we do definitely appreciate the sacrifices you guys have had to make in order for us to have a podcast where we just speculate wildly about things we don't understand. So thank you out there for giving us the ability to do that, and happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. And until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.